Welcome to your podcast, Leadership is Tricky, where we'll tackle various topics, challenges, and experiences as it relates to your investment in leadership. So, let's design success together. Now your host.
Hey everyone, Eric here with Leadership is Tricky, and we are back. And I have another special guest, Mo Barrett. How you doing, Mo?
I'm doing great, Eric. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you for, I think we met a few years ago, kind of just in passing. And, you were at a crossroads in your profession and what you were going to do next and how that was going to happen. And yeah, and then I see you that you're flourishing now. And that makes me extremely happy. But no, thank you for taking the time to join us here on the Leadership is Tricky podcast.
Thanks for letting me be a part of this. This is awesome.
Yeah, it'd be great. Got the blue background and everything, and
I know it's my blue green screen.
Nice.
Props to the Air Force. So.
Oh, right. So that's a great segue into introducing who you are. So you're a retired colonel of 25 years from the Air Force.
Yeah.
You were a pilot, and now you're a high energy speaker that is helping audiences laugh, learn, and think. And that's really the tagline and what you go with in your methodology. And, we'll touch on that a little bit later. But so just keeping in the spirit of what we've been doing this season, I really just wanted to capture your story because I think it's fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
And we'll step through that. So
all right.
I'll kind of lead the way and then we'll go from there. All right.
I will follow.
All right. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and then, what you're doing now, and then we'll go through your progression to where you're at.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I retired on April Fool's Day, which was intentional in 2018. And kind of the years coming up to, I really didn't know because my whole vision board was to make it to 2-star. And so that's kind of all I identified as. And then kind of saw the writing on the wall and went ahead and set up my retirement date, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I was watching a friend of mine speak, and then he and I have very similar senses of humor and delivery. And he told me that's what he was going to do. He was getting ready to retire, and that's what he was going to do. And I'm thinking, that's a job. Like, you can get paid to speak. Like, you can get on a stage. I always thought that, as we're officers and people laugh at your jokes because you outrank them, and, on stage and you have a captive audience because you outrank them.
Right.
But I think it was the first time when somebody who outranked me laughed at one of my jokes or thought I said something insightful. I'm like, oh, wait, maybe this is something. So it's just been kind of on that path. And I think we talked earlier, and when I said, I just keep saying yes to opportunities and working hard to walk through those doors. So I am not wherever I thought I was going to be, but I love where I'm at.
No, that's awesome. And yeah, one of the things I didn't mention too in the opening, you are a comedian as well. So
yeah,
right. So you mentioned. Telling a joke and someone laughed out there, but no, awesome. Making people smile and laugh is a great skill.
Yeah.
So, all right. So where do you come from? So let's talk about, where it all started.
So a man and a woman meet. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to go that basic. No.
Right.
It's interesting. So I remember being about 12 years old and sitting at the dining room table when we're having dinner. And I've got 5 siblings. They're all older than me. And I remember looking around the table, and my mom and my dad and my 5 siblings all had glasses and I didn't. And they were all drinking iced tea with dinner, and I was drinking milk. And my siblings all called my mom by her first name. So I remember being like 12 years old and kind of wondering, okay, at what age do I get my glasses? At what age do I get to drink iced tea instead of milk at meals? And at what age do I get to call my mom by her first name? But the whole twist is my 5 siblings are actually from my dad's first marriage, and his wife died of breast cancer. So my 5 siblings we all had the same dad, but I was biologically only my mom. So my 5 siblings are half, and they're my mom's stepkids. But my parents, I never introduced them as half or step. Even to this day, it's my brother, it's my sister. My mom said, this is my daughter, my son, so my mom, none of us had this label of what it really was, like this accurate label. It's just a sister. But that taught me early on that labels are just that. They're labels. They don't really define the relationship. So I think a lot of times when we say stepsister or half sister or half sibling or whatever. We have this kind of preconceived notion, probably thanks to Disney and the wicked stepsisters or something, but
Right.
we have this preconceived notion of what that label means, and it's not always accurate. And it wasn't until I was 16. This might just say that I'm a late in life learner, but I was 16 when I realized that the people I called aunt and uncle and cousin on my dad's side were mostly my dad's first wife's family. And so again, I think about the love that they showed for my mom and I, that it was a seamless, their family member had passed away due to breast cancer, but they immediately accepted us and we rolled into that. That was our family. It wasn't like, oh, this is dad's first wife's whatever. It was they were our aunts and uncles and cousins. And again, that was really powerful. And when I realized really what it was and kind of got more worldly and saw that, I'm like, that's a powerful thing when because labels they come with this again that preconceived notion, and so it's just like looking at labels and looking at them as just that, just labels, because I think we all have all these different labels that we can categorize ourselves as.
Oh, absolutely. I know in our family, it's we're like a bag of Skittles, you know,
Yeah.
right? And we drop the full half step thing,
Yep.
right? You know,
Yep.
my mother is my mother, and my brothers and my sister are just that, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so no, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I find it interesting now, though. Do you drink iced tea now?
I don't, but I also don't drink milk, so
Right.
but I did get my glasses. I got those finally, thanks to
Right.
age. Yeah.
Yeah, I paid for
Yeah, I
these, so
know.
I
Yeah. Tell you what,
yes.
man.
Yeah, so speaking of your dad and your mom, and I was doing some research. So it's Walter and May,
Uh-huh.
right? Your
Uh-huh.
dad and mom, and they met at Sears,
Yeah. It's
and for you young folks out there that don't know what Sears is, it was Amazon before Amazon, you
yeah,
know.
right.
Yeah, remember we
Remember
used
the Sears catalog. You could buy a house through the like what we call the craftsman style. Now you could buy a house through Sears. So yeah.
yeah, we couldn't afford any of that. We would just sit there and window shop, anytime the
Yep.
Sears catalog showed up, we're like, oh
It was
man,
like
it's
four,
here.
it was like 4 inches thick.
Right. That's probably why they went out of business, trying to, keep
Yeah.
all that printed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Uh
But your mother comes from Hawaiian heritage, right?
hmm hmm
So how much did that play in your upbringing and just having those two different types of cultures and heritages in your family?
I think a lot of it is just that becomes your normal. That becomes, and it isn't until you find somebody else who's got something different. Like I thought everybody ate spam and everybody knew what sushi was and everybody
Right.
knew that sashimi was raw fish and sushi's the rice and everything, so it, it becomes your normal. But I will say one thing growing up, every weekend, if I wasn't playing sports, my dad and mom would take me to, because we lived 12 miles outside of DC every weekend. Antietam, Bull Run, Gettysburg, Monticello, Mount Vernon, the Smithsonian's. And it was, again, that was my normal. And it wasn't until I was later, I'm like, Dad, why do we keep doing this? And he said, you're going to meet people who live 12 miles, more or less, from these amazing history lessons and opportunities. And they don't have to be as grandiose as the Lincoln Memorial. He goes, but you're going to meet people that live so close to these things and don't take advantage. Again, I thought that was the norm. Like when you are in a town, you find out what the cool thing is to do and you do that. Um, and I learned that's not the norm. And I see people that are so close to these things and don't take advantage of, like you're in Germany or you can go anywhere in Europe because you're such a great central location. The people that don't take advantage of that or just always eat at McDonald's or Popeyes because that's what they're
Right.
familiar with. So that's actually more from my dad than from my mom, but they both leaned into that really hard. And so again, that's just my normal. And so I'm still doing that and pushing other people into their uncomfort zones as well.
Yeah, it's also pushing people into curiosity, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because to just I live over in Europe, but sometimes you find yourself taking it for granted,
Hmm.
and you don't really realize how good you have it until you go to other places, right?
Yeah,
And you
for sure.
realize, man, I'm in this place where people save their whole lives to come visit
Yeah.
one time, or they never
Yeah.
make it at all. So,
Right.
yeah, that's pushed my curiosity to really understand what's going on in the world and the different
Hmm.
cultures and foods and music
Yeah.
and arts. That's
All
all
the
amazing.
things.
Yeah, so you go from this kid in this wonderful household of multi patchwork, and you guys
Hmm.
gel together, and then your dad spawns this curiosity in you to go off and really understand what's around you, and bringing people in, right? So I think that's just
Hmm.
naturally who you are, is like bringing people together, bringing people in, and sparking that curiosity.
Yeah.
Just in my research over the last day, stalking you, to
Uh-oh.
really understand, where your headspace is at. And yeah, so I do have a question for you, because, 25 years in the Air Force, making it
Yeah.
to, the rank of colonel, what really sparked your interest in wanting to go into the Air Force?
So my dad was in World War II, so he was 52 when I was born. So if you can imagine being 52 and having a newborn, but um,
Exhausted.
exactly right. Yeah. So
Right.
uh, um, so he was in the Army Air Corps, and he would tell me stories all the time. And every night, my mom would do prayers with me, and my dad would stand in the door frame, and he would sing the Army Air Corps song, which of course later became the Air Force song. Um, and then my brother was in my dad's brother also served in the Navy, and then my own brother went to Virginia Tech. And I remember I have pictures of one of my favorite pictures is from behind. My sister took it, and my brother's in his Virginia Tech uniform, and I'm holding his hand, and you can tell by my feet that I'm trying to get into step with him. And that became kind of almost like this metaphor analogy. I call them metaphor analogies because I don't know what they are, but always trying to keep up with him and do that same thing. And so I, I can't, I wanted to be a veterinarian until I saw how you take the temperature. And I'm like, nope, not putting the thermometer there.
Right.
Um, but I always knew I wanted to be in the military, and I always knew I wanted to be in the Air Force. There just was no other option. The way my dad spoke about his battle buddies, and he was only in 4 years during the war, and all the experiences my brother had, there just was no world where I wasn't going to be in the Air Force. And so I don't have this like one defining thing. It's just that was it. There was no other thing, right? So that for whatever it was, their experiences shaped my path toward that.
No, that's awesome too, because my family as well. Most of the men in my family have served in the military in some form or
Hmm.
fashion. Both my mother and my father were in the military as well, and that's really
Hmm.
all I knew.
Right?
So yeah, so when I figured out I needed some discipline in life, my dad said, "You're going to join the military," and it was the best decision of my life. So
Same, same.
right, right. And it's those stories, and just being around that environment that kind of shapes you too, that really sparks that, that's my tribe. Let me go join that and be a
Yeah.
part of that.
But
No,
another
cool.
thing kind of to that point, is if my dad had not shared those experiences, and if I hadn't seen my brother, read his monthly letters back home and stuff, I think there's an important lesson in there that if we don't share our story, we don't have a chance to make somebody else curious. So, for example, like we live in this very insular military world, like we have our own jargon, our own language, we have our own rivalries, Army, Navy, Air Force, but
Yep, go
but
Army.
we're yeah, yeah. No, well, I listen. Air Force sucks this year, so but it wasn't until like 5 or 6 years ago I met who is now my best friend and business partner, Katie, and she is a pure civilian, um, has no exposure to this, and it isn't only through it's because I shared these like what acronyms, and she's like, wait, what does that mean? And slows us down to make us realize that we are in this echo chamber of military mindset, military language, military jargon, military traditions, military artifacts. And it isn't until we start sharing those that we realize that our experience is not the only experience. And I think that's something any human is guilty of, is that one of the things I said in my TED talk is people need to pull their head out, right? And you can take that for what it means, but
Right.
until we get away from our phones and our screens and actually look out and see that there is something 12 miles away that's worth seeing, or see that there is a new food or drink or culture or person that we can expand our own horizons. It starts with us sharing and realizing that we are not the only, it's not just our own echo chamber. So I think that's really important too, is that we need to share our stories so that people can say, maybe I want that. Maybe we can inspire somebody else to do that path that we're on, or maybe not.
Yeah, when I was in school, I had a professor, James O'Brien, and he talked about how stories kind of shape people's experiences, right?
Hmm.
Um, but he was huge on just trying things, right? And
Yep.
just, getting out there and making yourself uncomfortable. And then
Hmm.
from a leadership perspective, right, is putting people in the unavoidable path of learning,
Yeah.
right? It's sometimes it's one exposing them to certain things, right, in a way that doesn't feel threatening, right? Because you give too much
Right.
information that, you know, they'll protect
Overwhelm. Yeah.
themselves, right? But sharing those things and putting them in that place where they can learn and be curious, right? Exposing them to something new and hey, just try it once, because I'll try anything 3 times. I figured that out. I'll try anything three
Okay.
times. First time you're kind of like, second time, I might have liked it. I'll try it one more time and give it a go, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, for those out there listening, be curious, right? Try
Yeah,
new things.
absolutely.
And for all you leaders out there, right? Put people on that unavoidable path of learning because that's our job, right? Inspire,
Right.
motivate, push them forward, and increase that status quo because we like to live in our status quo, right?
Yeah.
I make the joke all the time. I'm a creature of habit,
Yeah.
right? I, I say all that because I've had to push myself for the last few years to try new things because I am a
Yeah.
creature of habit. So yeah, cool. So question for you. So as you go in the Air Force, how was how's the training for the Air Force? Like I said, I'm an Army guy, right? We went to basic training, and we had our head in the mud. What was that experience for you as a young woman, going into the Air Force?
Yeah. So I know the Air Force is usually the one who's got their boot on the Army head in the mud. So you're
Right.
welcome. No.
On your way to the
Um,
dorms.
yeah. Yeah. Right. Oh, or the Marriott. So something with 4 or 5 stars and a buffet. Uh, y- you know,
Right.
it was interesting. Again, I didn't know about the Air Force Academy. I learned about it through a friend who wanted to go to the Naval Academy. That's a whole nother story. But um, I remember being I didn't get into the academy the first time because my high school guidance counselor was right. But I tried again. And I remember getting accepted to the Air Force Academy. And then I remember being at the DODMER, right? So acronyms within acronyms, the DoD Medical Evaluation Review Board was a physical. And it really was just a formality because I'd already been accepted. Go through the whole battery of tests, EKG, getting poked and prodded. And it was just the last thing I had to do. And this guy comes in with his clipboard and he's like, okay, do you have any criminal record? I'm like, well, no. So I'm like, no, no, sir. Okay. Any illegal drug use? Which I didn't. I'm like, no, sir. He goes, any problems with homosexuality? And I stopped for a second because another thing I've known my entire life is that I am gay. I mean, again, it was about as natural as me going to the Air Force is that I knew that's where I was oriented. But I also know this time, this is when, homosexuality was not only discouraged or you couldn't openly serve it, it was illegal. Like you could not be gay and in the military. And so I had this moment where I was like, I, this is something I want. I know I can be a good leader. I know I can be a good citizen service member. But I also know that there's this prohibition on my kind of people serving in the military. So I had this big integrity thing right at that moment. But then I also said, you know what? I just need to answer the question honestly. And the question was, do you have any problems with homosexuality? And so I said, no, sir, which was an accurate statement because I was very good at it. So I just remember that. And I call it my first lie in the Air Force. And I don't mean to make light of integrity. Um, but that was something I struggled with. I mean, that was, 1989.
Right.
And it wasn't until 1993 when Don't Ask, Don't Tell came about, and it wasn't until 2011 when it was repealed. So in my one career, that was probably my biggest issue was being gay and was illegal when I came in. And then fast forwarding to retiring, married to another Air Force colonel who has my last name and she's a girl. So in one roughly 30 years span, which is a testament to how well the military does with integration and stuff like that. And I know we're always trying something, African Americans, we had Tuskegee, women in the military, women in combat, gays, and now we have all these, these other issues that we're trying to look at how can we integrate them into the military. Again, it kind of goes back to that label thing. So I looked at how people were labeled when the military, we're learning and we're trying to get in this leadership laboratory and we're trying to figure out how to make people curious, how to let them fail. Um, but again, it goes back to that label thing and just saying, well, just because somebody is this or is this doesn't mean anything because they're still a human that's just got all these labels. And so again, all those things kind of came together to be this formative thing to mold the kind of leadership decisions I made and also my perspective on leadership decisions being made and leadership decisions that I'm going to make, So kind of a long-winded answer, but it really just goes back to the labels that we assign to things and not putting too much weight into those labels.
Yeah, I think you hit on something too, is when you have certain values, right? And when it's compromised, or you're not at peace with
Hmm.
that decision that you're about to make, because it could be that your aspirations or ambitions could potentially go away,
Right.
or not follow through. And then just where society was, or
Yeah.
is, and one of the things that I just talked about on one of my last podcasts, and I've talked to several people over, society isn't where it needs to be, right? And I
Hmm.
don't know that it will be there in my lifetime. But what we want to see is progress,
Hmm.
as we step through and step through our lives. Is like we want to see some form of progress. And you kind of laid out the timeline for people with that are homosexual in the
Hmm.
military, right? Where it was against the law. Then it was like the don't ask, don't tell. Then it was repealed, and there's a
Yeah.
lot more diversity and inclusion in our military ranks today, which I think we're
Hmm.
better for it, right?
Hmm.
Because it kind of forces people to, one, get out of their own way, right? To
Yeah.
understand that we all have the same values, even if we don't have the same beliefs.
Yeah.
So no, thanks for sharing. I appreciate that,
Yeah,
and
of course.
um, yeah. So you were told no when you wanted to go to the Air Force Academy.
Yeah.
What was that moment like for you when you heard that no?
So it wasn't just a no, it was a no with a laughter of like, why would you even think that's possible? So again, this was my guidance counselor, and I say he was cleverly disguised as the head football coach because I'm sure the school had him on payroll to be the head football coach, and he just happened to be my guidance counselor during the day. Um, but yeah, I, I just remember thinking, A, you didn't need to laugh. Like and he was right the first time because I didn't get in, but he just laughed at me and like it was the stupidest thing I could ever have said. And I remember feeling so small. But again, as the last of six kids, I always say I'm motivated by the power of no, N-O. And as I grow older, I'm saying that I need to be motivated by the power of no, K-N-O-W. Uh,
Right.
but at the time, I was kind of like selfish and I'm like, I'm going to do this. And so I applied and didn't get in. He was absolutely right. But again, motivated by the power of no, I'm like, okay, so I still had this goal, and there were multiple ways to get into the military. I could have enlisted, I could have gone to OTS, I could have gone to ROTC. But part of the allure was kind of like you said, I needed that discipline, and I knew the academy could provide that more so than me going to, any college or something and being in ROTC. But just being motivated by that derisive laughter, and that's probably not the best way to be motivated, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. So I had all these paths and I had to figure out what are the routes to get there. And I feel like in my life, I've never done the traditional path. I just feel like I'm always on my own path. But the more I realize there is no one path, right? So I don't
Yeah.
know if the army had this pyramid of how you get to be a general, or it's like, you have to have your PME, your professional military education, you have to have command, you got, like there was like this path. And the longer I was in the Air Force, I was like, well, my pyramid to success kind of looks like a dodecahedron, and all of a sudden I'm over here, but then I get over here. But so it's like how you navigate that. But just being motivated by somebody laughing at you also changed when somebody came to me with an idea or a thought or something they wanted to do. It may be unrealistic, but you kind of keep that in and you still encourage them and you let them find out whether it's realistic or not. And you, again, pave that path to success, like you said, and which means sometimes you have to let them fail, but you got to let them fail on their own terms too. So, um, like I said, he was right the first time. The second time he wasn't. And that Christmas break, I came back to the high school in my class A's and I went to see him. And he's like, Michelle, I always knew you'd get in. I'm like, yeah, if I could have flipped him off, I would have, but I knew that wasn't
Right.
proper. So, but I did in my head.
Right. No, no, I think your success was a flip off enough, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
right.
and to your point, I think like using that as fuel,
Yeah.
as someone I played sports,
Hmm.
most of my life, and I always used the doubters, throughout my career, as fuel,
Yep.
because now I'm unapologetic about my success. I look back and
Hmm.
and I thank them. Once
Yep.
thank you for the feedback is the way I look at
Yep.
it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And whether it was positive or negative, it was a gift, right? But it's almost like socks on Christmas. You kind of look at them like, eh.
Yeah, those wool things are gonna be scratchy. I'm never gonna wear them except for the one time you see that person who gave you those. Then you got to wear them.
Right. And no,
Well,
no matter how
kind
ugly they
of,
are. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Well, kind of going to your point too, I was listening to your podcast with General Brown, and one of the things he said that really stuck out to me was that he learned more about leadership on the athletic fields, right? And what's is it Douglas MacArthur on the fields of friendly strife are sown the seeds,
Mhm.
and I think it's amazing to me how many leadership lessons we can learn. Again, I speak in metaphor analogies, but from the athletic fields, like whether it's competition or combat or leadership or decision making or time critical decision making. That's one thing I love about sports, what even individual sports is that how much we can learn about ourselves or about others and how we integrate with others. I love sports for what it brings out in everybody and the team is a powerful, again, just reminder of how we can all work together for a common goal.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, you learn a lot about yourself in sports. I mean, in
Yeah,
in moments of adversity or crunch time pressure, you realize, what leadership competencies either you have or you don't have very
yeah,
quickly. And I'm very thankful for sports. And going back to General Brown, he did have the luxury of having one of the best coaches ever, right?
yeah,
One
yeah,
of the best leaders ever to help him navigate a lot of those things. So shout out to Coach K and General Brown.
yeah.
All right, so you get through the academy, right? You wore your class
Hmm.
A's and you go back and stick it to your guidance counselor. So let's talk a little bit about being the first and only. And I'll let you
Okay.
kind of, frame that for us.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So, and this has kind of come out with launching into my speaking career. I see a lot of other speakers who have this grandiose door opening to be able to say, I was the first this, I was the only this, so I kind of got caught up in that first this, only this. But I realized that all of us have a first, best, and only, right? So, and that is you. And so I always say, and again, going back to labels, right? I can say I'm the first half Asian, gay, female, disabled vet from a blended family to do this, right?
Right.
Because everybody's got the thing that makes them them. Um, but so that was an important thing, and it really hit home because my first operational assignment, after graduating from the academy, I did casual status and I went to pilot training. And then my first assignment was I chose a C-27, which nobody had heard of, but through some fluke I knew about. And the Air Force only had 10 of them, and they were based down in Panama, which I really thought was just kind of like South Florida, but that was before my geography got corrected. I looked at a map like, nope. Um, but I went down there, and it wasn't until after I chose it, and somebody just casually said to me, they don't have female C-27 pilots. Like you'll be the first one. So it wasn't on my radar until that, and I didn't know what to do with that, but I kind of prepped, I braced myself for, going into this boys club, and I had all these you know, I had all these penis references in my head so I could counter them like, "Oh yeah, you need a penis to do that." Like all these sarcastic things. And I got down there, and the other thing kind of going back to the gay thing is one thing I always said is I'm going to be a good person. I'm going to do my damn job. And really everything else didn't matter, right? So I'm going to be a good sister. I'm going to be the best academy cadet. I'm going to be the best pilot training student. I'm just going to do my best and be a good person in the process. So I got down there, I had all these, I don't have a penis quips and comebacks and sarcasms ready. Never got to use a single one because all these pilots saw me as another pilot who's in there to do a mission. It didn't matter what door I went to the bathroom through. Um, and again, it just reinforced that be a good person, do your damn job. So I look back on it now, and yeah, I was the first, I was the only, but I not saying I need to leverage that, but it is a moment that I could leverage to get into things, right? To say, oh, we're gonna have, that's how you get hired, right? You're the first of something, you're the only of something. But I haven't leveraged that maybe to a fault, but at the same time, that's really not what it's about. Like, because I think everybody is the first, the best, and the only at something, and that is their unique blend of things. And so, yeah, going down to Panama, the guys were great. We're still in touch. We still have reunions. Really tight knit group. Never had an issue. I mean, just never had an issue. Now, with the machismo attitude of the places we flew into, different story.
Right.
But yeah. So I loved that assignment, and I love being the first and the only, and still to this day am of the only C-27A pilots. But I don't know. It's kind of gotten lost in the be a good person, do your damn job mantra.
Sure, but I'll see it from this lens, right? One,
Okay.
awesome. Thank you for being the first and only, and paving the way for my daughters.
Yeah.
So
Thank
I
you.
just want to say thank you, and I want them to stand on your shoulders one day. So,
Awesome.
and it's okay for you to, be, braggadocious a little bit about that,
Yeah.
because you put in the time, you put in the effort, and you succeeded, and I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
So, um, so you also flew the C5,
Hmm.
right? And for those of you that don't understand aircraft, I flew in a C5 a couple times, and it is a massive, massive plane. So what was it like, one, flying that, right?
Hmm.
And then I read a little bit about this really taught you about perspective
Yeah.
and seeing the big picture of things. Can you just explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So the C5. So one of the coolest facts about the C5 is the Wright brothers' first powered flight. Their short little 12-second, 13-second flight could have taken place inside the cargo compartment of the C5. Like, I think that's a really cool fact that just again the evolution of flight. And so for people who are familiar with the 747, that was Boeing's answer to the military's request for proposal for a strategic airlifter. So Lockheed's C5 got selected, and the Boeing went on to produce the 747. So that's kind of just for size reference. And also the C5 is the third largest plane in the world. The Russians have two that are bigger, but we always joke that they can't afford the fuel to fly it.
Right.
Um, but it's interesting to me. A lot of times it, when you're in training and you're looking at all these cockpit switches and it's overwhelming. The one lesson I got from that is if you look at the whole elephant, we use this analogy, like the whole elephant, it's overwhelming. But if you can just focus on just kind of narrowing it down to more manageable pieces and bites, I'm mixing analogies. I'm not saying we should eat elephants. I'm just saying that we're, looking at the whole, being able to break it down and able to kind of digest small pieces that when you step back become like, okay, this was overwhelming at first, but when I just did this and did this and this, and then it helps you create a bigger picture, but you have to focus on the small things first. But the other, like the literal perspective part of it is like walking out of the C5 and just turning around and seeing this massive thing. And you look at whatever 227 feet, and then you just look at your little window of where the cockpit is, and you think about all the things that have to happen for that one person up in that little space to make this massive thing work. And so there was a literal perspective that I got from that, just looking at how big it is and how small I am in the big perspective, but in the big picture. But the other thing that I really learned from it is that it's not just the pilot who makes that thing take off, land, taxi. It's the crew bus driver who drives us out there. It's the flight ops people who give us our weather report, and it's the box lunch people who make our meals and nourish us. I mean, it literally is this team effort. And that goes the same for a single seat aircraft. You still have the maintainers, you have the crew chiefs, you have all the people that are involved fueling it up, arming it up. So I think there's a lot of perspective I get from just how big the thing was and just how small I am in comparison to it. It was very slimming to stand next to it, so that was nice. But also the perspective that it's not just one person, it's still a team sport. It's still, it may be one person at the controls flying it, but it's still a team effort. And so I love that. And that's another reason I love crew concept, multi-place planes is because you have other people that are helping you. And again, bringing that diversity of thought and opinion and experiences in.
Yeah, so one of the things that I notice when I go to the airport, I'm right here in Frankfurt, so
Hmm.
it's a huge airport, and we can see all the planes taking off because they're like 10 minutes away from us.
Nice.
Um, but when I go to the airport, I'm very like keen on seeing how things are working from the moment that I get out of the car and walk in, right? You got the
Yeah.
people walking around, telling you where to go. You've got the counter people getting your stuff on the belt. You've got the people loading the planes with food and all these things that are
Yeah.
happening for me to get on my flight and complain about how cold it is in the front, you know, right?
Right.
So it kind of gets lost on us. Like, I don't know how many people go out there and just look at all the details, of all of the pieces that have to come together, right? The maintenance crews, just the functionality of the plane to make sure that everything is functioning properly for me to get to
Hmm.
my destination. And yeah, so I could just imagine in the amount of responsibility that it gets placed on a pilot,
Hmm.
right? Because not only do you have the crew, you have the equipment and you have those lives in your hands,
Yeah.
as you're transporting folks around. So, did you feel pressure, having all that responsibility right at your fingertips?
I didn't because maybe I should have. I don't know. But again, because there's a lot of people involved in one of the things I would say in my crew brief when I was the aircraft commander, I would say, if something goes wrong in the air and we have time to talk about it, we always say aviate, navigate, communicate. So like just fly the plane first. That's the most important thing. So we have an engine fire indication or whatever the abnormal thing is. We fly the plane first, and if time permits, we're going to get out the checklist. We're going to do everything, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to, everybody can weigh in. Load masters in the back. What do you see? Everybody has an input. And I said, we'll try to be as democratic as we can, but at some point, we have to make a decision. And at that point, I need you to jump on the Barrett bandwagon, and we're going to execute that decision, whatever it is. But the idea being that when something goes wrong, if we have the time to, it's pretty obvious when things just, you just need to make the decision, your training kicks in. You've seen that too. Like even in life, just something happens. And if you have the time to negotiate and kind of talk about it and get difference of opinions and everybody to weigh in and we vote, yeah, that's great. But there are times when we just need to jump on the Eric bandwagon and we need to make that decision. So we got to jump on Dad's bandwagon and make the decision. But
Right.
um, I never really truly felt like this it is an awesome responsibility, but I never felt like an overwhelming burden of responsibility because I knew that I had A, training, B, mentors I could still leverage, and then the whole crew that we could talk through things and make a good, solid decision. And the decision would be better than anything I could do on my own. I guarantee it.
Right. No, thanks for sharing. I know it just popped in my head, what kind of
Yeah, no
pressure
worries.
does a pilot have when they have this huge machine that they're, flying through the air, which probably shouldn't fly when you think about physics and all that.
Exactly, right? Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I'm like, ugh.
right. All right. So I was listening to one of your TED Talks and I listened to about four of them here over the last couple of days. And one, I found them extremely entertaining. But there was one story that stuck with me, which was a stall recovery maneuver story.
God.
And this was, and I'll summarize it for folks just because of time. But
Yeah,
if you guys get a moment, go out and look at the TED Talk that Mo talks about this. And really, it's about the combustion engine and right, and then how these maneuvers happen, where you were in there with a pilot. And they were doing things that you wasn't really in your training that kind of like
yeah,
deviated off script, and you grabbed the leg of the pilot, right?
yep.
And in that, with that, you did it a couple times. So you kind of groped your
Yes,
mate in the cockpit.
yes.
Um, and not the literal sense grope, but grab the leg. But
That
but
grope
you,
was fair.
but you talked about that you learned that you had to get the hand off the leg and take control at
Hmm.
some point. But the statement that really stuck with me is when you said it's okay to lean on others, but when we grip too hard, we stall our life. So
Hmm.
can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I found
Sure.
that to be extremely, it was very inspiring. And I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days of like, what does that mean? And, am
Yeah.
I holding on too hard to something? Am I stalling my life? Right. So you put me in like a state of disequilibrium,
Oh,
once I heard
sorry.
that.
Let's fix that then. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, Again, I think about it in terms of no matter what perspective you want to take. So I'll even use it with my dogs. Got three French bulldogs. They're just crazy, right? But a lot of times I want to hold the dog because that's what I want. I want to hold the dog. I want the dog to love me. I want to squeeze it and call it George.
Right.
Um, but if I hold it too tight, and I'm being literal, if I just squeeze that dog too tight, it 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 dysregulates the dog because that's not where they want to be. It's kind of hold him in his non-consensual embrace, you know. But if I let the dog go and eventually the dog will come back to me because I'm letting it have its free will and things like that. I think a lot of times the military probably more so than any other organization attracts control freaks, right? So we want to be the one who run the decision. I want to do all this stuff. Carried it over to my business perspective. I love spreadsheets. I love them. And so I was doing my own budget because I like to have all these automated things and was referencing all that was just awesome. But that's not a good use of my time. And so I just this past year finally hired an accountant. And that was part of me letting go a little bit because I was gripping so hard onto knowing where all the macros and all the formulas went and stuff like that. And it just wasn't an effective use of my time. I love spreadsheets, yes, but that wasn't my particular zone of genius. Now there is somebody and that's their zone of genius. So by me letting go and releasing the spreadsheets and the cells and the columns for a little bit, um, that frees me up to do and lean into my zone of genius. And it also leverages somebody else's zone of genius who can do it faster, quicker, and better, and probably more legally. Um, but
All right.
but the way I use the analogy in that talk is we were doing these stall recoveries and our confidence maneuvers. So he was demonstrating one, and that's when it freaked me out, and I grabbed his leg. But the next time I had to execute it, and I can't execute any kind of recovery if my hands aren't on the controls. And again, we've been talking about curiosity. One of the things I say too is I feel like people have outsourced their intellectual and their critical thinking. I think a lot of times we go to social media and we just parrot back without fully understanding. We just grab onto these opinions and perspectives that may or may not be ours. So until we kind of loosen our grip a little bit and find out the veracity of those things, I think that's when we stall our lives. Like literally just kind of when we outsource that thinking, we're stunting our own growth and personal development. And that's when you kind of stall out because you're just on autopilot and you let somebody else doing the thinking, the driving, the controlling, the decision making, and creating your own opinions. So I'm kind of mixing a bunch of analogies. So it's kind of like the elephant. I'm not advocating eating, but
No, right. I hope Peter, if you're
yeah,
online, you
exactly
don't
right.
advocate eating an elephant.
No.
But no, I think you hit on a good point, right? And I was just having this conversation the other day, right? So no matter, we just had the elections, right? And I'm not trying to turn this political at all. So I'm
Yeah.
not, that's not the way I'm going. What I was getting at was when we're having dialogue with others, and if we're both not educated on a topic, right? Both of us
Hmm.
educated on a particular topic, um, you can't change anyone's perspective or mind
Yeah. Hmm.
because it becomes a very emotionally charged conversation
Right.
because frustration sets in because even if you have all the facts, they don't, right?
Yep.
They have their beliefs, their opinions, and no matter where they got it from, whether, I see it all the time now, people take a 15-second clip and they pass it off as fact. Like I saw it on
Yep.
Facebook, I saw it on Instagram, I saw it on pick a social media platform.
Yeah.
I even saw it on the news, right? Whatever segment or whatever type of news platform you get your news from, and they run with that as that is now that's their beliefs, that's their values, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, let's just both get educated on it because maybe
Hmm.
you can change my mind,
Right.
you
Right.
know. But I just implore folks out there is educate yourselves on whatever topic you feel passionate about. understand it, so that way you can have meaningful dialogue with others and you can see it from other people's perspective, which could potentially change your mind or not, right? But at
Yep.
least we can have a healthy dialogue about those things. So,
Well, and it's a civil dialogue too. And even like when you were just talking, you had your hands in a fist, right? And that's
right,
kind of going back to that gripping so hard. Like, I believe this. It doesn't matter where I found it. I believe this to be true. You believe this to be true. And so until you can loosen that grip and check another source, I have somebody who texts me all the time this stuff, and it's always from the same website. And I'm like, I'm not going to click on it anymore until you send me some other website where you're getting your information. I'm not gonna engage because it's very one-sided, opinionated, tight-gripped. This is the only place I'm getting my facts. I'm like, all
right.
right,
That was
but
extremely perceptive of you to see me with my bald fist. So,
well, I thought you were boxing, but you've got basketball stuff behind you, so it's hard to say if it were
right.
boxing, basketball.
I'm trying to, emulate Michael Jordan back there, but
Yeah, yeah.
no, I mean, I kind of did that deliberately because it shows just
Yeah.
that positive stress that exists, right, just
Hmm.
within us all, and that's what happens, right? That stress, collides at some point. But to your point, I mean, if we just loosen our grip a little bit, we might be able to shake some hands and walk away from the table,
Yeah.
and be better for it. So,
Hmm.
I don't want to run out of time before getting to a couple
Oh,
other
yeah, no.
things, but I do have a question for you. So,
Okay.
just in your long, vast career, I'm not saying you're old, please.
I
Just
was going there.
what was your biggest leadership challenge? And then how did you overcome it? And what did you learn from that?
You know, so in my first assignment, it was in the C-27, it was two pilots and it was one enlisted. That was our crew. So disproportionate number of officers to enlisted in the unit. But I don't know why, but my particular style was addressing enlisted by their first name. And I know that's not really a typical military thing. We talk about the typical military pyramid and the structure and fraternization and all the different things for good order and discipline. But I addressed the load masters and the enlisted people I worked with by their first name. Now, again, they used rank and last name with me. Um, my first letter of admonishment, or it wasn't a reprimand, but I got counseled because I was calling the enlisted by the first name. I got like paperwork because I was calling the enlisted by the first name. And I remember thinking, here's somebody who was two ranks higher than me. I was an O1, he was an O3 or 4. And he was saying something and punishing me for something that I just didn't agree with. Like, I don't think it was a real objective thing. It's not like you ran a red light kind of thing. But it was the first time I realized that, first of all, the people who outrank me don't necessarily know it all.
Right.
And their style of leadership, and I thought this was a style thing, their style of leadership may not be the same as mine. So I took it into consideration. I still did call the enlisted troops by their first name. I kind of maybe peppered in a couple ranks a few times. But it was the first time I realized that just because somebody has something on your shoulder that's higher than yours doesn't, or even on their sleeve because they're enlisted, doesn't mean that their way is the only way, their way is the right way. But it kind of broadened my perspective that, okay, yeah, maybe there are times when I can lean a little bit more professional and not call them by their first name. But I didn't think that I got the best output from people when I only saw them as rank and last name. I think again, it was my personal style. It was the first time I started realizing that my personal style is different and it's going to be different than anybody else's. Just again, first best only. That's my way. And it's not always going to be the traditional way. And I feel like I got more out of people, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like I got more out of people by treating them as a human and not just a rank and name, what's on their uniform. So that I mean, I can remember exactly where I was standing in the unit. I can picture everything about that one moment, and it was early on in my career, but it has stuck with me.
No, thanks for sharing. And
Yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, I think what I find in the military, and it's probably, easily, overlaid on, civilian sector as well, or whatever
Hmm.
profession, typically when we move into a new job or a new role, right, we have to learn how to be that,
Yeah.
you know, in that role, right? We have to learn how to lead in, a different organization that have different types of people and different,
Right.
just culture challenges that exist, no
Hmm.
matter where you go. And I find that, just from my experience in moving around and moving up the ladder is every situation is different. But one of the things is I lean on my leadership principles and I lead the same way.
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
ha
Good.
I have not, changed the way that I lead people. One, I lead people first, right? I lead with, integrity and honesty, empathy,
Mhm.
right? And then ultimately accountability. And I stole the model from our friend Michelle Bolos,
Yep.
the Heat model, right? So she has, honesty, empathy, accountability ultimately leads to trust. And I've adopted that. And just being true to and being my authentic self, no matter what environment I get put in.
Hmm.
So I care more about the person than I do the work. And I say it all the time. I don't care about the work because the work will get done, right?
Yep.
But to your point, in one of the things I do give a lot of people, I give people a lot of grace because I know that it might be their first time in this experience,
Yeah.
right? And and then I just, help try to coach or mentor them on, hey, look, this is a way to do it, but this is another way that you could probably look at
Right.
it, to gain better effects or outcomes. And
Hmm.
um, yeah, so I just, to your point, right? You took it under advisement and you
Yeah.
continue to do what you were doing, and I'm pretty sure it was effective. And and I would probably say that those enlisted folks probably appreciated you for that because you saw them as a human first.
Yeah. Hopefully.
And hopefully, right? All right. So, like I said at the beginning, I wanted to get back to laughing, learning, and thinking. What does that mean?
First of all, the most important thing is it has to happen in that order. So,
Right.
laughter is my currency. I grew up in a house. I don't remember any fights or yelling. It was all laughter based. Everything was solved through laughter. And now my dad had Alzheimer's for 8 years. He passed away. And laughter was key because it was either that or tears. And my mom has dementia now. So right now it's just laughter. That's all we have. And so I think there's a strong connective laughter is just really important to me. Um, but I think that when we laugh, it lets our guard down a little bit. There's all the physical things that are better, lowers your blood pressure, and I don't know, cures diabetes. I'm not sure what it is, but
Right.
there's all these benefits to laughing. But when we laugh together, we're connecting with each other. And I think when I look at an audience, whether I'm emceeing or whether I'm speaking, I strive for that first laugh. That's when I can relax, is once I've gotten the first laugh. And I don't do, chuckle hut fart jokes just to make people laugh, but I try to use clever humor or witty humor. I like the humor where the joke kind of lands at the beginning of the audience so you can hear it trickle back as people get it. So I like that. But when people laugh together, they're connecting and they're starting to let their guard down. And that's when you can say, okay, we're one, we're all here together, we're kind of simpatico, we're connected. And then you can bring that teaching moment. So I go laugh, learn, let's learn something together. And then my idea is that when we laugh, it's kind of putting things in a different position. And when we tell stories versus data, we're hitting different neurons and stuff. My hope is that after the talk or after the event, I've said something or they've experienced something with their audience mates that will make them think. So again, laughter is the first thing to connect people, let their guard down, then we can learn something, kind of sneak in a teaching point and then frame it in a way, whether it's a story or an analogy or a metaphor analogy, that it'll give them something to think about. So I like to use a lot of analogies. So maybe someone's going to drive by a Sears store because maybe there's a couple brick and mortar stores and that will trigger something. So again, using the stories to do that. So that's why I laugh, that's why I learn, that's why I think, and that's why that order.
Yeah, maybe now that they've listened to this podcast, they're gonna go find that Sears catalog that's aging in the grandma's house
Yeah,
somewhere,
yeah,
right?
right.
Right.
Someone's sitting on it as a booster seat.
Yeah, between the Sears catalog and the Toys R Us catalog, I mean,
Yeah,
those were it when I was a kid, right? You'd sit there and
Jeffrey
look at
the
all the.
giraffe.
I know. And, when I sing this song, my kids are like, "What?" I was like, "I don't
Oh
want to
man,
grow up. I'm a
I'm
Toys
a
R Us
Toys
kid."
R Us kid. Yep.
Right? Yeah, cool. So before we go, there's two things that I saw that I really wanted you to touch on. Like, what
Okay.
is a Mo Quirkatall?
Okay.
Um,
So
yeah.
okay. So Mo Corkatall is it's so funny when you watch I don't know how the German TV is, but watching the TVs over here, these commercials for these pills
Oh,
just
yeah.
drive me insane. And it's so funny because the side effects are way worse than whatever it is you're taking the pill for. And the commercials, I don't even know what I'm supposed to take these pills for. So mocorquitol is supposed to be a play on it's some sort of drug, but again, the drug is just small doses of laughter and insight, and again, things to make you laugh, learn, and think. So it was kind of my play on. So that's the name of my blog. So if you go to mobarrett.com/mocorquitol, I think that's where all my blog posts live. Again, the idea is that it's a dose of laughter to give you a new perspective, and again, something to learn and hopefully think about.
Yeah, and for folks looking to subscribe to that, you can go to mobarrett.com, and you can subscribe to get your Mo Corkatol, so your
Delivered
dosages of
right to your pharmacy. Yeah.
right. No, but you're right. I mean, when I watch those commercials, I'm just like, what are they talking about? What happened?
Right? Yeah.
What?
What are you selling? Why do I want this? Yeah.
Right. And then I wanted to close with so I saw this purple child eating dragon reference, right? And my daughter was looking over my shoulder. She's like, "What is that?" And I was like, "Well, I'll ask her." So yeah, so what is that?
So again, growing up with the five older siblings, they would always take turns, take me to the pool in the summer. And so this is a summer day. I'm 4 years old. My brother and my other sister are taking me to the pool. I'm expediting, but we get to the pool and my sister pulls out the surprise, and it is this dark, blood red, vicious, inflatable ring with a dragon and fangs. And it was horrifying. And so she puts me in this thing and pushes me out to the middle of the pool, and I am screaming. I'm 4 years old, can't swim. I thought my sister loved me. Come to find out, she obviously hates me. She gave me this scary thing, doesn't even want to save me. And I pretty much black out for the rest of the trip. And it wasn't, I kid you not, it wasn't until like 40 years later, I found this picture of me with that swim ring on, and it wasn't blood red, it wasn't massive, it wasn't scary, and I didn't hate it. It was in like 4 or 5 pictures where I'm hugging it. It was pink, and apparently I called it Dre Dre. I, I mean, it was the complete opposite of how I remember that one moment in time where I thought my sister hated me, where I was terrified. And because of that one moment when I was terrified and I assumed all these things and I didn't question them, I carried that for 4 decades until I actually had the picture to show that it it was I mean it was 180 degrees the opposite. And I'm very grateful that I have that picture. I still have it on my desk because it reminds me that a lot of things that we hold on to, again, we grip too hard in the past, we're holding on to a false truth. We're holding on to a false narrative. And so to question that. So the purple dragon reminds me that you know, the things that we remember kind of get warped over time, and to question them and revisit those. And again, I'm very grateful I had that picture because that helped me revisit it. But now I use that to like, okay, am I really remembering this that accurate? Was it really that bad? Was it really that personal?
Right.
Mostly no.
And hopefully
So
it fixed your relationship with your sister. So you've been
yeah,
holding on to that trauma.
exactly right. And she's like, "What did I do?" I'm like, "Well, you bought me a floaty." So anyway, yeah.
No, awesome. Thanks for sharing. That's funny. I'll let my daughters know when I go
All right, yeah.
upstairs. Because she's like, what is that? I was like, oh, let me ask. Yeah, so I like to close with I always ask the same thing of everyone. If there's someone out there listening for the first time, if there's someone out there that sees himself in your story, what would be that one little nugget you would leave them with?
The biggest thing I would say is share your story because everyone has a story. And then don't be afraid of hard work. One of my favorite quotes is opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and it looks like work. So share your story and don't be afraid of the hard work. Push your sleeves up.
Awesome. So thanks. Well, we're here at the end, and I want to thank you, Mo, for coming on and
Thank
sharing
you.
your story with me and letting me ask you some of these, hard questions and
All
picking the
right.
scab at your trauma. Sorry.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, so for those that are first time listeners, I want to thank you for tuning into Leadership is Tricky. For our return listeners, which we just hit 8,000 or so subscribers
Nice.
now on YouTube.
Congrats.
And yeah, and I think we just passed 50,000 downloads for the season.
Wow.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and we're on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube where this video will be posted. For those that are in your car right now listening, just make your way to YouTube if you want to see what Mo looks like and see her infectious smile. Right. And yeah, so for those that want to leave comments or have any questions that I can pass on to Mo, you can write me at Erick, ERICK, at leadershipistricky.com, or visit our website and just leave something on the chat at leadershipistricky.com. So Mo, thanks again for blessing
Thank
us
you.
with your time and your stories and your infectious attitude and smile. And we'll go ahead and sign off here, and then I'll chat with you here shortly.
Awesome. Thank you.